Okay, hi, I'm Ed Manley. I'm the moderator of this program today, my first ever. So we'll be sorry for things that didn't go quite perfectly. Uh, Richard Weil is hosting us, so he's going to be the first speaker. First, let me tell you who we have today. So we have Richard Weil, who is certified food executive, graduate of the University of Houston, world famous hospitality school, and owner of National Restaurant Consultants. We have Dave Zander, who has an MBA. He's a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer and Vice President of the Food Service Institute. And I'm Ed Manley. I'm also an MCFBD and a graduate of the Cornell Hotel School, also kind of world famous, retired Navy Lieutenant Commander and Vice President of the I'm the Chairman of the Board of the Food Service Institute. What am I? And we're all three members of the board for the International Food Service Executives Association, founded in 1901, the oldest. Dick is chairman of the board. I'm the chair-elect, and Dave is a board member. Uh, Dick and I, Richard and I, were esteemed to get our doctorate in food service from NAFM last year. And so today, Richard is going to tell us from his white paper. He's going to give us the cliff notes from his white paper, which will be available to you, about what food service operators, not just restaurants, can do to get going once we are able to get out and go to restaurants and feed people in colleges and hospitals. And Dave is going to talk about his 23 years as a submarine chef, and I counted up and determined he was under the water for 17 years. So kind of a fun story of what it's like to be a submarine chef. So I'll turn it over to Richard to tell us what we can do to be prepared for post-COVID-19. Richard?
Well, thank you, Ed. Appreciate this. And I'm really thrilled to be sharing the podcast here with Dave Zander, and highly respected individual, both in the military aspects as well as what he does for food service industry as a whole. And of course, we have the amazing Ed Manley today. And Ed Manley has certified thousands and thousands of people all over the world in food service and hospitality, safety, customer relations, customer service, healthcare, et cetera. So we've got a great person who's hosting us here today with Ed Manley. And this will be a podcast that's being recorded. It will be posted on the, Ed's FSI. It will be posted within the International Food Service Executives Association. National Restaurant Consultants, we will post, and it should be readily available across the country pretty much this afternoon. So thanks, Ed, for putting this together. So the question to me in terms of what should the food service and hospitality industry professionals and operations be thinking about as we look to reopen the country? And as we speak here on the last day of April 2020, there's many states that are beginning to reopen. A lot of them are not reopening restaurants just quite yet. They're reopening certain things with, of course, safety in mind and social distancing. As far as the food service and hospitality industry, our company, National Restaurant Consultants, has written an extensive, as Ed referred to it, as a white paper on some guidance on how restaurants should be thinking about this. First and foremost, it's life, health, safety. And I'm going to cover that as the primary topic here today. We are advocating that restaurants really take a hard look at what are they doing to, first and foremost, keeping their staff safe. How are they keeping their staff safe? All the way from PPE, personal protective equipment, all the way on down to sanitizing hourly, daily, weekly, and even perhaps monthly, in terms of keeping their staff safe first and their guests safe second. It will be, in fact, a perception by the consumer, by the guests, by our customers, as to how well operators are looking at safety and health management within a restaurant. We have published this white paper, and it is going to be readily available on the FSI website, or the FSI Facebook, I should say, as well as others that I've mentioned. And this is about a 25-page protocol of things that restaurateurs and food service operators should think about. So amongst the things of safety, the personal protective equipment. That starts with masks, and it starts with the use of single-use gloves. Masks and gloves should be the very basic PPE that you're providing for your staff. Taking their temperatures on a daily basis or prior to each shift, while the CDC is not necessarily mandating that, that could be something that your state or local jurisdiction is advocating. Well, a temperature of someone isn't going to be completely indicative of everything, because they could still be asymptomatic even without a temperature. Most of all, our staff should be asked on a daily basis, and you should be logging this on a log. How are you feeling? Have you come in contact with anybody? And be logging every single person every day and making sure we're asking these questions. Certainly, if anybody has any signs of coughing, sneezing, etc., they should be sent home. Now, we are in springtime, and springtime means we have allergy season. So it may come about here a little bit that we have some people who actually have allergies versus any signs of a respiratory or an infectious disease such as COVID-19. So you're going to have to manage through that a little bit and make sure that your staff are healthy. That's number one, that they feel healthy. Logging this, making sure you do keep a log of your staff that are sent home as just a precaution so that you can trace this thing. Contact tracing is what this is being referred to by the CDC, keeping a contact tracing log. Hand washing. You can't emphasize, it can't just be single-use gloves. It has to be hand washing, proper hand washing. Things that food service operators already know and were trained many, many years ago. And Ed's been training forever through ServSafe and through his own food safety and handling programs. Proper hand washing. That means, of course, having soap, washing your hands in hot water, that your hand sinks have a minimum of 100 degrees Fahrenheit temperature coming to them, and it's 20 seconds. And a single-use towel that's used, that's disposed of, to make sure that the staff members' hands are clean. Now, those are just some basic things that we already know about, we should be continuing to do. Another thing, when sanitizing your facility, the restrooms need to be managed and managed carefully. That may mean you need a restroom monitor. You know, years ago, we used to think of a 4 or 5-star restaurant that had somebody as a attendant. Well, they don't have to be inside the restroom, but probably you need to have somebody outside the restrooms monitoring how many people are inside the restroom at a time and keeping it social distancing. And if you've got 2 stalls, you maybe can keep it to 1. If you have 2 hand sinks, keep it to 1 person at a time. Keeping social distancing. Certainly, if it's a family, a mom or a dad with some kids, that would be acceptable, but we want to monitor how many people go inside of the restrooms, how many people are walking down the common areas of the hallways, in the host or the reception area, limiting and keeping social distancing. Of course, spacing inside our restaurants. A lot of the states are going to reopen restaurants with 25% capacity. It could be 50%. We're really not hearing too many states that are going to open in phase 1 of more than 50% capacity, but making sure that you have a tasteful note on the top of the tables that show this table's not available for seating. Thank you for your patience in listening to blocking off these tables. So in the restaurant, yeah, Ed?
Can I ask you a question? What about the seating stations? Could you have them pre-done? So for the people that have reservations, so maybe they don't have to stop at the host stand and maybe just go straight to a table. That would stop some clog up in the beginning.
It could be. That could be certainly something that could be done. If you are going to, similarly to like when you might have done a soft opening, is what this first phase should look like. So when you did a soft opening, maybe you only had 25% capacity when you started your restaurant. That would be a great idea, to have them not have to stop, or very, very limited amount of time at the host station. And maybe you do reservations only to start with, because there's going to be a pent-up demand for people to come into your restaurant. So that's a great idea, Ed.
Are they going to keep doing uh, curb service, do you think? The ones that didn't do it before?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that you need to be thinking about. If you pivoted your restaurant to more takeout, to go, if you would, and curbside and delivery, you want to continue to do that because the consumer is going to want that still. There are a lot of states right now that have negotiated or either mandated maximizing the fees of third-party deliveries, such as Grubhub, Uber Eats, etc. That could be no more than 10 or 15%. So that would help the bottom line to a lot of restaurants. So be sure and check with your local jurisdiction. But yes, you should not undo what you started and successfully have done. In some states and some local jurisdictions, they may even allow you to continue to sell alcohol to go. Now, that's been a very popular thing in many states, that with a container that's sealed, that you could sell alcohol to go. Check with your local jurisdiction. That can help you with your revenue components and also keep your curbside and your to-go business healthy and vibrant. So yes, we think that you should not stop that, at least through phase 1 and phase 2. And to go and carry out with such, and delivery was such a hot growing segment of our industry, it's only going to continue to get bigger. Ed, you had another question?
A lot of my Facebook and LinkedIn buddies, I'm the king of barbecue operators for some reason. So they're not in a restaurant. What about healthcare, schools? What can they do to get back in business? And the perception of me sending my kid to school, and I don't want to put them in the cesspool at the food service operation. So what can they do? What can cafeterias do?
Well, for sure, we're not going to probably see much school food service till the middle of August or the end of August, most likely. I would suspect that school food service is going to be down at least till almost the end of August, 1st of September, when the school year starts. Now, there's still conversations about some public schools may not even get started till maybe September, October, after they see what, maybe if there's an echo virus coming back to us. But food service, in terms of institutional food service, cafeteria food service actually has a pretty good control point in terms of a cafeteria food service. The problem is going to be the dining rooms. So in healthcare, and we just had a very good mutual friend of ours last week on a video that we sponsored at National Restaurant Consultants, Laurel Shooter, who's the regional vice president for Morrison Healthcare. They're not seeing any public dining areas planning to be reopened for quite some time. And the reason isn't because of dispensing the food through a cafeteria approach, because they can keep their servers masked and gloved far enough away from the patron who's going through the line, and that's a fairly safe and effective way to serve people. The problem is where are they going to eat it? Where will they dine? And so that's the issue that institutional food service is going to be facing, and that's social distancing in the cafeterias and not having enough seating or spacing to handle or facilitate. But yes, I think cafeteria approach service will be fine. Self-service, no. So a lot of hospitals and a lot of schools, especially in colleges, food service feeding, they have for many years been doing self-serve. That is going to not come back anytime very quickly. You're not going to see self-serve. Even on the beverage stations, there's going to have to be some sort of a pivot or some sort of a monitor, similar to what I was explaining, to have a staff member monitor the number of people that are near a self-service beverage station. Probably have the opportunity to figure that out, but again, it needs to be monitored. It's all going to be about social distancing, Ed.
How about less people in the back of the house, because it's pretty hard to run a kitchen and social distance from everybody?
Well, one of the things that we're advocating is a limited menu. We're really advocating, and Chef Rolf is on with us here, is we want the chefs and we want the food service operators to really think about their top 20% of their items that do 80% of their business, and figuring out a way to limit the amount of items on their menu. Because if you can limit the amount of items on your menu, you might be able to, in the back of the house, spread your prep areas around. Now, some of the smaller independent operators, it's going to be very difficult to do. They don't have a big kitchen. but spacing, perhaps scheduling your staff, prep, possibility of even using some further prepared, further processed, value-added products from manufacturers that could eliminate or reduce uh, uh, prep work would also help. I'm going to ask Chef Rolf. He's asked to raise his hand. If that's okay with you, we're going to ask him to comment on that. Okay, Ed?
Yes, please, Michael.
Yeah, we're probably having a problem with cost and be able to pay these people. Where is the price gouge, or where is the money going to come from to pay these people and then pay for the food on top of that? Because we're having a problem with supermarkets not being stocked with meats and fish and chicken. Now you're talking about restaurants opening up, but how are they going to pay the price for the food that's going up in the problem we're having now?
That's true. Is there going to be food for the people if the restaurants are sucking it all up now?
It's
True.
a great question. And so we've spent a lot of time on supply chain management, because supply chain management, and we're reading about it in the last few days a lot, that national manufacturers such as Tyson or even Smithfield and the likes are having some supply chain processing issue. There's plenty of raw materials. That's not the issue. The issue is the ability to process, because we've had some outbreaks in some of the manufacturing plants. So similar concern to what Ed said is that is keeping people away from each other and not have a breakout in the back of the house. So that means PPE, personal protective equipment, and using hand washing stations, and making sure people are not sick and keeping them as separated as possible. But one more other point, you're right, labor is going to be an issue potentially, especially with so many people on unemployment, whether they're motivated to come back to work or not. And as far as the cost of goods, it is extremely important that restaurateurs and chefs look at their theoretical food costs. And that's why the menu really has to be looked at, because some items, even if it's your most popular item, some items may not be practical from either a labor standpoint or a food cost standpoint to be able to cash flow for you when you put it out as a menu item for your guests. So Chef, you had another comment?
Yeah, dealing with Mr. Manley in his classes and learning from him and learning from the industry and going to school. We as chefs have done this and, put in practice about keeping things safe, clean, organized, rotation, everything that's done to this point. Now we're in a panic mode to say that, well, we have to change our ways to make things more safe. Well, if we've been safe before this, why is it such a mandatory to make it more safe and make it more practical? And using masks, using gloves. We've done this before. What has changed?
Yeah, it's true that this is what we've been preaching for all the years. There's really, but what's different is there's little bugs that are going to jump from people to people that we don't have normally. So normally we're talking about touching people and, the face and all that, but now we've got the virus that can kill people. So it's what we've been preaching. Thank you for mentioning those classes, and it's same old for us, but it's more dangerous now. So really I need to segue from Richard. Richard, why don't you tell us how we can get that white paper, and one more time about your company, how we can reach your company, and then we'll segue to Dave Zander about submarine service. So
our paper can be, you can find everything at restaurantconsulting.us, restaurantconsulting.us. I will have it available on Ed's Facebook and Ed's LinkedIn this afternoon, along with this video, and you'll be able to find that white paper. And again, I think it's going to be very useful. We've also created this one-piece paper that's being published this afternoon on what to post in your front window of the restaurants to welcome your guests back. So thanks, Ed, for the time. I'm going to hang out here and mute myself, and we'll unmute Dave Zander and let you move to that, okay?
Richard, can we call on you in a couple of weeks to maybe do a half-hour segment by yourself, because this is really important and you have a lot more things.
Do that, and if Chef's available, we'd love to have him join again.
Okay, yeah, Chef Michael, thank you for your comments. Okay, Dave Zander spent 17 years under the water by my calculations. When you become a submarine sailor, you're a submarine sailor and you don't get much shore duty. So Dave Zander, tell us what it's like to be on a submarine cooking food for several hundred people.
Okay, guys, if and girls, if can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All I see is you, so I'm not sure if anybody can see me or not.
Everybody can see you.
Okay. So it really depends on what kind of submarine you're on. I've done pretty much all of them. I started out on the Stonewall Jackson, which is one of the old boomer boats. Then I went to a fast attack, the USS Albany, jumped to another fast attack, the USS Montpelier, before I did my last submarine tour on the USS Tennessee, which is the latest Tridents that are out there.
So the boomers stay under longer, right? Are they the ones that stay under longer? And how long do they stay?
So a Trident, they work on a two crew system. You can, if you're on the blue crew or the gold crew, you help refit the submarine for 35 days for the other crew. And then you'll go into an off crew for 2 months where you'll do training. Typically, we would send our people to places, high-end restaurants, to learn cake decorating and stuff like that, so they could bring that training back to the submarine. And that would be what we would call off-crew training for the time.
When you're out at sea, how long are you out at sea?
If you're on a Trident submarine, anywhere between 70 and 90 days typically, sometimes more, sometimes less. Fast attack submarine, you go out, you'll deploy for up to 6 months, but you won't be underwater for 6 months. You'll pull into ports every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, depending on the op tempo that's going on. If you're on a fast attack, you get to see a lot more of the world than you do if you're on a Trident. The Trident submarine, you just go out and you stay out there and then you pull back in typically.
One of the fun stories I like to hear from you is loading up, because I teach food safety and refrigeration and freezers. When you're loading stores, where do you put the stores?
Okay, so dry food, you're gonna pack 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag. And you're going to be, if you're loading up for deployment on a fast attack submarine, you're going to be walking on your number 10 cans to start your deployment for about the first month. So they lay essentially a deck of number 10 cans with some diamond decking over top of it. And you'll spend your first month or so walking on the number 10 cans. So being the storeroom, the jack of the dust, is a challenge, because you have to find where that can of green beans is, or where that can of kidney beans is, or whatever. And you will turn your, on fast attacks, you'll turn, and you're deploying, you'll turn your chill box, where we normally keep your fresh fruits and vegetables, you'll turn that into a freezer also. So you'll essentially depart with 2 freezers. You'll keep your eggs up in the radio room, where the ventilation is nice and cool, or in the escape hatch, if you have a CO that will allow you to do that. So yeah.
And the rest of the refrigerated product might go in air vents, is that?
Well, okay, so if you're on a Trident, you can put your potatoes and eggs down in the missile compartment, lower level, where it's nice and cool and moist. But you won't typically, on a fast attack anyway, the last day you have lettuce on deployment is the day you leave the pier. You'll immediately stop using fresh lettuce and fresh salads and stuff like that. Now, I've been retired since 2008. So if people that are operating today, the new submarines like the Virginia class and them, if they have a better system for it, I'm not aware of that. So I'm just speaking from my experience of 24 years.
And how many times a day are you feeding the sailors?
You feed 4 times a day, every 6 hours. So 6 or 5 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m., and 11 p.m. are your 4 meals a day.
And how many
And-
sailors?
Go ahead.
How many sailors are on the ships, the boats?
Typically 150 to 175. So not a huge amount, but they'll operate in 3-watch sections. So you're only feeding a third of the crew, well, 2/3 of the crew off going and oncoming at any given time.
And is there actually hot racking? Do you actually share the same bed? Not at the same time,
Not
hopefully.
the food service personnel don't, but the very junior people do. Yes, especially when you carry visitors, riders, or whatever you want to call them. There are people that sleep in the torpedo room also on fast attacks.
So if you and I, we're not food people, we're machinist mates, and we share a bed, that means that when I go on duty, you're in the bed, and then you get out of the bed, and I put my linens on.
Correct. That's yeah. If you are sharing a rack, you'll only get to sleep for 6 hours at any given time because someone else is waiting to sleep on that rack.
Okay, and what's it like to cook under the water? Is it bouncy or is it a smooth ride?
So imagine yourself in an airplane. That's the most equivalent feel that I can give it. Unless of course you're doing angles or you're showing off the boat with an emergency blow or something like that. And oftentimes the night baker will put a cake in the oven, and the diving officer of the watch will play games with them and take a 20-degree up angle and dump the cake all over the galley and stuff like that. And of course they think it's funny. They don't have to clean the mess up. But, looking back on it, it's kind of humorous, but it wasn't humorous at the time.
So how much coffee do you go through?
Oh my gosh, probably, based on the 35, the number 35 can that we used to get, you typically go through about a can every 3 days. But like if you get if compared to like a Folgers can, probably about 2 cans a day.
Okay.
If you look at a normal Folgers can.
And what kind of food are you making? Are you making only Sloppy Joes, or are you making pheasant under glass, or what are you making?
Typical with any leading CS, it's all designed, it's all based on how well you manage your mess. So when I say mess, I mean your galley, your restaurant, however you want to refer to it. But just like with any restaurant, if you can manage your funding, you can serve pretty decent food at least once or twice a week. So I typically would run my mid-rats meal, the midnight meal. And I'd catch a lot of flack from the guys for it, but they'd be happy on Sunday when they were getting their steak and lobster or their steak and seafood, steak and crab legs. Because every Sunday, some sort of prime rib or a steak and a lobster tail or shrimp or whatever for the Sunday meal. But again, that requires planning throughout the week. You have to save you can't go out of budget. So beanies and weenies, chuck wagon stew, chicken patty sandwiches, maybe a potato bar, something cheap, and you save all that money out throughout the week, so that on Sundays or Saturdays you can run pretty decent meals.
What would be now you're 12 years ago, but a Coke cost 5 cents then. But what would be the budget for a day per sailor?
Well, let's. Man, you're putting me on the spot here with some math.
Like $12 or $10 or $2?
Well, see, the submarine guys, they get an extra allowance. So you would get the BDFA, whichever it was at the time, I think $5.75 maybe, plus an extra $1 for being on submarines. And then if you're operating in cold temperatures and stuff like that, you'd get an additional 50 cents, or if you're on some kind of special operation. So you'd have to actually, and that's part of being the leading CS, is you have to take that BDFA and multiply it by how many people you think you're going to have, by how many days you're going to be at sea, and you can get a rough estimate of how much money you're going to expect to spend each day on food. And like I was saying, the less you can spend each day by serving something that might be simple in the crew's eyes, but you're doing it for, with the eye on the bigger prize, which is serving the steak and seafood on Sundays or whatever. So
day one of your tour is easy, but what about if you're out for 3 months, what does the 11th week look like in terms of you eating beanie weenies 6 days in a row, or
So there's this wonderful tool that you get as a leading CS. It's called a menu change, and typically towards the last month of your deployment, if you haven't pulled in anywhere, like a Trident submarine that hasn't pulled in, they're going to come back with a lot of food, but it's not going to be food that necessarily supports the menu they departed with. So you might find yourself writing a menu change to serve beanie weenie, or just have a soup, what they call a soup down, which is cold cuts and soup, just to try and get an extra meal out of what you have left on board. I can't tell you. I mean, there's times you'll run out of ketchup and you got to figure out, okay, what am I going to do here? I don't have any ketchup. How can I manufacture ketchup or something that at least tastes like ketchup, or barbecue sauce, or there's some tricks that you can that you learn along the way that you can apply to manufacturing something that's going to be similar to something you might need. You can't run out of sugar. You can't run out of flour. You can't run out of coffee. If you run out of that stuff, you might as well you might raise your hand when you pull into port and say, I need to be relieved. So, but on fast attacks, you have these things called ox tanks and stuff like that. So you just pack them full. The auxiliary tanks, they don't, on the fast attacks, they don't necessarily use those for what they're used for. They're just ox tanks. And you lift the hatch up and you crawl down in there, and it's about 20 feet either way you can go, that you have sugar, flour, coffee, and stuff like that stacked up in there in in abundance, so you don't have to run out.
What's would you call the biggest challenge, different from working? You've worked in civilian restaurants and you've worked in shore galleys in the Navy. What's the biggest challenge that people wouldn't think about, chefs wouldn't think about?
So they do these things, and I'm sure they do them on the surface ship too, but they do these things called drills and drill downs and stuff like that. So they want to practice for whatever inspection is coming up, and you want to also be ready to fight a fire or a flooding at any given time. So they run drills typically from like 6 in the morning till 11 in the morning. And at 11 in the morning, guess what they want to do? When the drill set ends, now you've been participating in drills with the crew the whole time. They want to eat at 11 o'clock because that's lunch. And well, you've been fighting fires and you're in an OBA and you're in a firefighting suit and you're soaked with sweat. And now the crew is standing in line wanting to know where their food is. So that's the biggest challenge is trying to figure out, okay, how do I hide this guy and let him keep preparing the meal while we continue to try and help the ship be ready, or the submarine be ready to fight casualties at any given time.
Outside of the kitchen, what's the most harrowing experience you had on a submarine? Not related to cooking, just a holy shit moment.
Right. So on the Stonewall Jackson, we actually had a flooding casualty where we were ventilating the ship at periscope depth, and the chief of the watch was not pumping water off in a manner to which we were taking water on. When you ventilate the ship, the mast comes out of the water, and the head valve is supposed to shut every time water touches it. But in this case, it wasn't necessary. It's an older ship. It wasn't necessarily touching or closing, and water kept coming in and going into the the fan room drain tank. And well, if you take on enough water on a submarine and your head valve falls below the water line, you can figure out what happens if the head valve doesn't shut. You just start sucking water down. So we took on about 9,000 pounds of water and flooded out the entire operations compartment just about, which on the old submarine on the Stonewall Jackson, the MCC, the Missile Control Center for the missiles, was down there in lower level. And so we flooded that out. And here I am hip deep in water on the mess decks because they've closed the watertight door and they've blown the forward group to try and get the submarine coming up to the surface. So all the water is collecting on the back of the crew's mess, and I'm hip deep in water, and I'm like, what the heck is this? what's going on here? And I had a smart ass chief who said, you might as well just, well, we're going to die. So I was like, oh my gosh. So that was interesting.
So what are you going to feed us for our last meal, Chef?
So that was my most harrowing / interesting experience.
God bless you. So your family missed you for the 17 years you were undersea. They didn't get to go with you, right?
Nope, not at all.
What's your son doing now?
He's getting ready to go submarines, actually. He's going to be an A-ganger on submarines. So
you came back with all these harrowing experiences, and he wants to be like that, huh?
Yep, he sure does.
God bless you. I did a Navy career too, but you did a real Navy career. Thank you very much. I'd love to have you back as well. And I'll return it to Richard Weil to sign us off. I think it's time to go. Thank you, everyone, for participating. You really appreciate it, and your feedback will be very much appreciated, as well as forwarding the information on Facebook to your friends so more people can see it. I'm Ed Manley, and I teach food safety, HACCP, restaurant management, what wine goes with what food, and you become a Master Certified Food and Beverage Director. We're giving some of them away for free to people who are affected by the coronavirus for a little bit longer. So check us out at foodserviceinstitute.com. And Richard, you've got it, buddy.
Well, thank you. Chef, thank you for your inputs today. Appreciate it so much. Appreciate those that are following us on this podcast. We will get it posted. I want to thank everybody, and especially Dave Zander, for those great stories. It's fun to catch up on that, Dave. And Ed Manley, of course, you are the greatest of all times when it comes to certification and training. We love you, buddy. And that's it for now. So long. Take care.
Bye, all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for being on.